Now, as much as we all love horror movies, horror video games are simply on a whole other level. These 10 video games all toyed with players in supremely devious and mischievous ways. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 cruel tricks horror video games played on players. Number 10. The Double Dog Window Jump Scare, Resident Evil. Now, the Resident Evil series has shown a downright sadistic penchant for toying with its own fans, but Capcom never really quite matched the brilliance of that opening jump scare in that original 1996 game. Near the start of Resident Evil, while you're exploring the Spencer Mansion, you'll walk through an L-shaped hallway, and as you pass by a window, a zombie dog, also called a Cerberus, will burst out of it. As anyone who's played this game without prior knowledge of this will attest, it's a positively pant-filling moment. Worse still, once you've dealt with that dog and moved further down the hallway, another dog will jump through another window, assuring players that they can't let their guard down. And because this jump scare became so well known, for the 2002 remake, Capcom ingeniously changed things up. Because here, the first time that you pass through the hall in the remake, the glass window will simply crack from the dog's attempt to get inside. But when you go back through the area later, only then will the dog successfully smash the glass. Sneaky, right? Number 9. Even ladders aren't safe. Fear. Now, the Fear series relished scaring the living doo-doo out of players, and honestly, the clue is kind of in the title. But generally speaking, the liminal spaces between gameplay environments, ladders, doors, and whatnot, are all safe spaces in survival horror games. Yet Fear turned that notion totally on its head with its heart attack-inducing ladder jump scare. As you start to descend the ladder, the shadowy, pint-sized antagonist Alma will suddenly materialize in front of you before turning to ash and disappearing. And even once you've recovered from that and climbed down the ladder, upon reaching the bottom, you'll be greeted by another sudden visage of a man who similarly turns into ash. 2 coronaries for the price of 1, basically. Number 8. Sanity Effects constantly warp your sense of reality. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem may have been a commercial flop upon its release in 2002, but its legacy as one of the most ferociously creative and slippery horror games of all time definitely endures. Its big selling point, and one which unfortunately failed to entice many GameCube owners at the time, was its sanity effects, complex and creative hallucinations intended to trick the player and throw them off kilter, and that they certainly did. Whenever the player's sanity meter drops low enough through encounters with enemies, their reality will begin to change. The effects can be as nutty as the player's body exploding, but usually the more subtle ones are typically the best. Back in 2002, when players saw the game randomly changing the in-game volume, resetting the game entirely and throwing up a blue screen of death, and even going so far as to apparently delete their game save, it was tough not to be freaked out. The fear and anxiety of triggering another reality warping effect was definitely real, in what remains one of the all-time best instances of a game smashing the fourth wall to pieces. Number 7. They looked like monsters to you? Silent Hill 3. Now, we could write an entire list on the many different times that the Silent Hill franchise has played cruel tricks on the player, but perhaps the most twisted provocation of all occurs in Silent Hill 3, when protagonist Heather talks to Father Vincent about Silent Hill's monsters, and he tellingly replies, "Monsters? They look like monsters to you?" The implication, seemingly, is that the creatures Heather has been battling throughout the game might in fact be the town's innocent civilians, and that the horrifying events have all just been in her mind. Even though Vincent follows up by telling Heather that he's joking, his sinister smile still leaves enough doubt that fans continue to debate the precise meaning of his words to this very day. After all, if Vincent is telling the truth, it calls into question every single thing in not only this game, but potentially the other Silent Hill games as well. Number 6. The Backhall is a safe room until it isn't. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Even the most fierce horror games offer up some safe rooms, designated areas where the player is safe from attacks and where they can take a moment to catch their breath or save their game. But Amnesia: The Dark Descent brilliantly uses the notion of a safe room to only further toy with the player's sense of safety, or indeed lack thereof. Midway through the game, you'll arrive at the Backhall, a hub-like area that acts as a safe room. It's decently lit, spacious, there are no enemies in sight, and the music is pretty calming. Even the presence of a creepy-ass fountain in the middle of the room can't ruin the chill vibe all that much. But later in the game, this apparent sanctuary will be invaded by the malevolent supernatural entity known as the Shadow. Flesh-like residue will fill the hall, and the water in the fountain will start to turn blood red. Though there's something of an unspoken agreement between developers and players that safe rooms are indeed off-limits, frictional games so ingeniously betrayed that trust in the pursuit of an intense scare, and it absolutely worked. Number 5. Open the trapdoor and lose your head. Until Dawn. So Until Dawn is a dew-eyed homage to the classic schlocky horror romps of decades past, proving just self-aware of the genre's mouldy tropes even while lovingly indulging in many of them. And when many players are controlling Ashley in the game's 9th chapter, they fall into a series of tunnels and are given a choice: investigate the voice of what appears to be a scared woman or rejoin the group. Now, conventional wisdom would say that rejoining the group is the right call here, but you know what, doesn't that seem a little bit too obvious? It feels like Supermassive is laying a trap, and that the actual right thing to do is the least intuitive, and that is to follow the voice. And if you choose to do that, you'll come to a trap door, which you're then given the option of opening. Again, no one suspects that betraying horror movie instincts is actually what the game wants you to do. It all feels just a little bit too obvious that this will cause Ashley's death otherwise, right? But alas, if you do open the door, Ashley will be brutally attacked by a Wendigo, which leaps out of the door and tears her head clean off. Oops. You see, the beauty of Until Dawn is that it both faithfully recreates classic horror scenarios and subverts them at the same time. In this case, players who thought that they were too smart ended up being fooled entirely. Number 4. Glitching players will get a nasty surprise. Slender: The Arrival. If all else fails and a game is getting too tough for you, why not resort to some glitching, right? Yet anyone who thought that they were able to use glitches as a crutch in Slender: The Arrival got a hilariously nasty surprise. You see, it's possible to glitch out of bounds whilst playing this game, and though you'd understandably assume that this would stop Slender Man from tracking you down, the developers in fact planned entirely for this. If the game detects that you've left the boundaries of the map, Slender Man will suddenly teleport to your location, complete with the taunting line of text, "Not even a bug in this game will save you from me." Game over. It's a brilliant yet maddening trick to lure players into a false sense of security that they're untouchable while glitching, only to prove totally the opposite. Number 3. Ellie saves Isaac after the credits roll. Dead Space 2. The original Dead Space ended with a player-trolling final jump scare, so fans were pretty primed to expect a similarly downbeat ending to its sequel. And wouldn't you know it, Dead Space 2 ends with protagonist Isaac Clarke stranded on the space station, the Sprawl, as its reactors begin to melt down and his life support systems start to fail. He knows that his goose is indeed cooked, and so he simply sits down to take a front row seat to the annihilation. And at that moment, the game's title flashes up and the end credits start rolling whilst dramatic music begins to play. Yet around half a minute later, the carnage is interrupted by Ellie, who turns up in a gunship to rescue him. The player is then given control of Isaac one final time as he flies to keep up with the ship and eventually comes aboard. Hilariously, the scene then lingers on Isaac as it appears that he's about to have another horrifyingly violent vision, only for Ellie to look at him like he's a total weirdo and simply say, "What?" Cut to black. The end. Well played, Visceral Games. Well played. Number 2. The Xenomorph remembers your hiding spots. Alien Isolation. Now, Alien Isolation is no typical stealth-driven survival horror game, because beyond the player's own ability to directly battle the Xenomorph, the creature's AI is programmed to give the impression that it learns from players' behaviors. Given that players will die a lot throughout this game, developers Creative Assembly wanted to ensure that the Xenomorph behaved like an actual living thing rather than a scripted creation, and so programmed a complex AI routine which saw its behaviors become increasingly complex as the game wore on. And as we all learned the hard way, this included the Xenomorph remembering your favourite hiding places. Though lockers can be extremely useful for hiding, relying on them too much, and after a beat you'll see the nearby Xeno rip the door off and have its nasty way with you. Given that most stealth-based horror games are built on fairly straightforward mechanics and easily identifiable enemy routines, it was both shocking and refreshing that the Xenomorph proved so fiendishly adaptable. And number 1, Lisa is always behind you. Believe it or not, it's been a whole 8 years since Hideo Kojima's mesmerizing horror experience PT was released on the PlayStation Store as a teaser for his ultimately shuttered Silent Hills project. And it remains one of the most unnerving and expertly crafted horror games of the last decade, if not ever, in large part because Kojima so inventively made the player feel like they're always being watched. While skulking around the focal haunted house, players will be periodically assaulted by a ghost by the name of Lisa. Back in 2019, popular games hacker Lance McDonald dug into PT's code and discovered that Lisa is actually programmed to attach herself to the player once they pick up the flashlight. From that point on, she's effectively tethered to the player's back, floating above them at all times and following them wherever they go. And so that feeling of being constantly watched is far more literal than anyone realized back in 2014. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 cruel tricks horror video games played on players. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ, but the O is a 0, or you can go to Instagram where it's the same handle, RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I'm not going to play a cruel trick on you, my friend. In fact, I'm going to fill you full of positivity and hope that it makes your day that little bit better. Because you need to know something, and that is that you are an absolute big ledge. You deserve love, happiness, success, all of the best things in life, alright? And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. I want you to go out there and smash your life goals today. Believe in yourself, because I believe in you. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.